And the reason, oh, can we keep chatting? Is it okay?
Well, now that we're being recorded.
Uncomfortable silence first. We are going to record this meeting, and that's just for folks that wish they could have been here and weren't able to. We'll provide the video and that kind of thing. With that said, are there any questions or anything that anybody has? And welcome everybody this morning. I'll wait for any questions on chat or anything like that. And so this morning, the plans we have this little presentation that we're going to provide you, and hopefully that initiates some discussion. And again, I'll be kind of waiting and hoping that you all say something. We have a planning worksheet, and the worksheet is really a simple one. It's basically how you feel about change. And we'll want to talk about that. Obviously, not everybody has to share the things that they feel about, but it would be really good to have a few people that are willing to share. And so that's pretty much today, is talking about more how you as a person, how I feel about change and how I address and deal with change. The following workshops will cover additional how I deal with, but also how to help your coworkers deal with change, especially if you've got somebody that's really having difficulty with this. And feel free to pipe up, say something, interrupt me that whole time. Again, I'm not going to talk the whole time. So feel free to jump in at any point. And with that said, Sue, Barbara, are we good to go?
Good to go. Recording started already.
Sounds good. Thank you. Well, we've got a few more coming in. Also note that in the chat, we do plan to, we'll have this planning worksheet that we'll fill out later. And we ask that you send that to the ODOT eConstruction email address. And that email address is posted in the chat, and we'll talk about it a few times during the day. Also, for the subcommittee leads on this call, we do have a stakeholder worksheet that we would like you to work with your team to fill it out as well. So Barbara asked me a specific time to tell you to get it here. So if you could email those worksheets to the ODOT eConstruction by the end of the day on May 3rd, we would appreciate that. And that stakeholder analysis basically allows us to identify the stakeholders that are going to be impacted by the change of implementing AASHTOWare project. And again, really encourage you to seek input from your subcommittee members and things like that related to those questions in that. So I think that is all the logistics we need to cover. And with that said, I'm going to kind of start the presentation here. So we have multiple change and transition workshops that we've got planned over the next 4 weeks, basically every Friday for a couple hours for the next 4 weeks. So today is to talk about the actual change and how that change affects you. And then the second module, so that'll be next Friday, is change and the emotional impact that's associated with that change. Some people feel actual grief associated with it, especially if you've been doing your job for years and years and you really like it. People will feel grief if that changes substantially. And also transitioning. So transitioning from one stage to another and getting people through that process. So everybody has to go through the process. It's just a matter of how quickly you do personally. And then accepting the change. So the last workshop will be discussing accepting the change and moving on, and getting basically getting the change accepted across the agency so that you can, I guess, look forward to the next big change at that point. Because that's kind of the world we live in right now. We're constantly in a state of flux as technology changes. And we really have to, the more adept we can be at making those changes, the better, right? So we have some goals here today, and we'll kind of go through with those. And so today is to really look and understand how you can cope through the transition and the change. Further understanding yourself and what's important, and also what's important to you. And how you can transition to the next role for you. So sometimes AASHTOWare can make it, can change your job substantially from the way you used to do work to a new way to do work. And so it kind of, and it also a lot of times will create new roles for people. So there may be some new roles associated with the work here. And feel free to stop me if anybody has any comments or anything like that. The next topic is to basically to begin to explore the opportunities and what could be next for you. So I found a lot of times that if I get in that exploration mode, I can make my new role or my new job a lot of what I want. I have a lot of, as you get more experience and as you have some background of experience, a lot of times you have more leeway to make the job what you need it to be. And a lot of times with this, those roles, as they're shifting and changing, sometimes that's really what's needed, is for people to get in there and explore and say, and fill those gaps. Say, okay, I see a gap over here. I'm going to fill it with a role. And so kind of defining your own. And then finally, to better understand how to help coworkers and team members through the change. So those are basically the topics over the next few weeks. And to kind of hopefully give you some practical information to address change and to help others. And to also, I guess, kind of share experiences and things like that related to change. So today is the first module. So again, welcome everybody. This is the Change and Transition Management Workshop, specifically for the AASHTOWare project, One Source of Truth. So APOST is what we've been calling the team, and the full implementation at ODOT. It's going to really focus on the changes associated with this robust software. So I know that most of you have been working in on subcommittees. I do hope there are a few joiners that may not even be associated with the project, but the software is extremely robust, as I'm sure you've found out. There are so many directions you can go in here when you're implementing everything like ODOT is. So you have pre-construction in production, you have estimation that's nearly in production. You have civil rights and labor, which we're implementing right now. We have construction, which we're implementing right now, and materials. And then on the back end of that, all of that, there's data analytics that has kind of a data warehouse and analysis kind of tool on the back end that ODOT is working with, or is planning to work with more. So this virtual session really provides us, the intent is to provide some insight on how change to work processes affect us as individuals and how we can better adjust to those changing requirements to do our work. Hopefully this will be really light and positive, and I'll provide better understanding of your reactions to change. I may call on some of you just out of the blue. If you're uncomfortable with answering, just let me know, and I'll move on and call on somebody else. But sometimes it's sometimes I just need to pick on people. Where are you, Donna? There you are. Okay.
I'm here. No questions yet.
So today our learning outcomes that we're hoping for is to, again, address the change and the need for change that applies to a changing work environment. And you're going to hear me obviously say the word change a lot today. And also this is building on our Monday kind of precursor that we had, where we watched the video about change, and we've got another video today to provide better understanding of your role in the change. So we all have some kind of a role in this change, and if we can make that positive, then that's all the better, right? And we can improve the overall culture, I guess, of working at ODOT if we're all together with this change and going through it and getting to the end together as a team. Also to analyze your reactions to the upcoming changes and how you feel about them. So that's really what that worksheet that we're going to fill out is based on, is thinking about those reactions and how you feel and that kind of thing. Any comments, questions, anything from anybody? I'm going to pull this window down.
Not so
here.
far.
Okay. I'm going to pull this window down here so at least I'm looking a little bit towards the screen. I've got so many screens going here. There, now I'm talking to you. How's that? I just can't have all the screens up at once. So what is change? Want to make sure that we're all on the same page for what change actually is. So change really presses us out of our comfort zone. To change, I have to step out of something that I know to something that I don't know, right? And that often, to varying degrees, makes us feel uncomfortable. We're being pushed to do something that we don't fully know how to do, or may become uncomfortable with, or those kinds of things. So that change really is a thing that pushes us out of our comfort zone. When I moved to Oregon, my wife and I, obviously the move to Oregon was a huge change for us. We sold a very large ranch house on 12 acres in the middle of nowhere and moved into downtown Portland. And in the meantime, we downsized. And so the changes were flying at us like crazy. And so we really stepped back and looked at those changes and how we were going to address them kind of as a team. And also we decided that we really wanted to push ourselves out of our comfort zone. I wasn't really feeling out of my comfort zone with moving to downtown Portland. So I really wanted to, I guess, push it more. And so one of those things that really pushed my comfort zone was I agreed to dance lessons. And I am Mr. 2 left feet and stumbling all over myself all over the place. And we did take several dance lessons. I didn't really like it, but I did take a few. And that really pushed me out of my comfort zone. And Gina got some bruised toes. Anybody else want to share any kind of changes that pushed you out of your comfort zone, like you really felt pushed?
I don't know. I'm pretty much, I'm introverted. So anytime we do, my husband's very extroverted. And so whenever we do social things, it's very much out of my comfort zone, even though it was, it was a change, but it, just going, to a work function, not my work function, but his work function, I feel, that's a change, that's hard. And it's just out of my comfort zone for sure.
I'll tag on to Vanessa, and it sounds like I'm a lot like your husband and you're a lot like my wife. And I guess the change for me was COVID and moving to full telework. I almost need that social interaction and, you know, the meeting people face to face, and the change to 100% telework and not getting to leave the house is definitely was a rough change for me. But I hear you, Vanessa, on the other side of it too, because my wife is like, yes, I get to stay home and I don't have to interact with people.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, to add on to Kenny's, yeah, the COVID telework thing and getting everybody working from home. I'm very much an extroverted person. I like being around people, seeing people in the office, talking with people, get a lot of work done that way. And my wife is very much the introvert, but me teleworking and my son doing school from home actually has had a negative impact on my wife because we're here all the time. And so she doesn't get that time of empty house that she used to have, that she could recharge where nobody was around. So yeah, it's even for those people that are introverted, I can see how this has affected them negatively.
Definitely, that's a good point.
For me, I think one of the things is that I don't mind change one at a time, where I can manage it and be able to make sure I got it under control and I've got comfort knowing I know what I know, and then getting the next change. And lately with everything, we've been being hit with change upon change upon change. And it's hard to get your feet under you for that. After that, without having that one thing under your control, everything seems out of control.
So too many pieces of change coming at you is pressing you out of your comfort zone. Yeah, that's a good point.
Definitely. So I work in IT and I'm new to ODOT, but over the last like 2 years, I came from a manufacturing site, and we were purchased like within a month of me getting there. And then we had a huge explosion on our plant 3 months after I got there. And then we were bought again like 16 months into my journey there.
Wow.
And then COVID hit like 21 months. I was calculating it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is
wow, that is a lot of huge negative change, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there was a bunch of like procedural changes, and it was just like we couldn't keep it straight, like what we should be doing and who we were reporting to. So it was a lot of like like cat's cradle, like the little childhood like rope game. And so it was just insane. So I really agree with Sue's point, like one by one, if we could just have one thing change, I'd be so good with that.
Just line them up. Yeah. Annie has her hand raised.
Hi guys. So for me, the big change in my life was when 15 years ago, I moved from Eastern Europe, from my country, from Bulgaria to US, leaving my entire family over there, leaving my job, selling everything, and coming to this country and start from zero. So for me, was very big change, and push myself actually to take a plane, which I was very afraid, but I don't have any other choice at that time.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a huge change there, and makes my move from from the Midwest to Portland not a big deal.
That's huge, Annie. Huge.
Anyone else? Beth.
Yeah, I would say even though people do it all day, every day, a big change for me, and one that took a long time for me to make a decision on, was becoming a mom. I was married for almost 7 years before we had our son, and it just was something, some people know right away that, they've always wanted to be a mom and wanted to have 10 children. And that was just something my husband knew, but it took him a while to convince me that it was the right time. So, and I still feel like our son is 19 and I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing. So it's just one of those things where, I feel like I'm constantly learning and how to be a good parent. So, and it's constantly changing. So that's a good lesson in change, I guess, how to roll with it.
That's a really good point, and how to roll with it. And yeah, I know I'm the fourth of 4 kids, And the youngest by 7 years, I used to think I was an accident, but my mom got mad. Because I'm born almost exactly 9 months from what might have been a Happy New Year celebration, but yeah, I think parenthood. If we had to have a test for it, we would all fail, right? As with our first kid. But then by the time you get to the fourth, it's like, yeah, I've seen it all, I've done it all. Whatever you do, it's not that big a deal anymore. And I also wanted to mention, about the discussions about the introverts that are paired with the extroverts. I'm kind of in the same situation. I consider myself an introvert for the most part, and my wife is an extreme extrovert, and I've kind of got this theory that introverts don't really make friends; extroverts adopt them. It's kind of what happens. And that's kind of the case with us. It was kind of my wife just kind of adopted me as a friend, and we went from there. So that's kind of interesting that there's so many, everybody on here that mentioned their husband-wife situation with COVID said that it was an introvert-extrovert relationship. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Even though it's not necessarily changed.
This is Shirley, and I was so relating to that introvert extrovert marriage situation, because for those of you that do know me, I am the extrovert. My husband is the other way, and so that is something over the years of our marriage you have to learn to adopt, and how you're planning on introducing change in your family life. And so, yes, it is something for those of us that are extroverts to remember that not everyone is going to jump in and eagerly adopt changes and want to do things. And we need to plan and accommodate that feeling, because like I said, I'm an extrovert. I'm ready to something new, someplace to go, a trip to take. I'm there. But I've learned over the years how to adapt rather to those changes. And for the one of you that just had a child not too long ago, life will be constantly full of changes.
Yeah.
And you never know when they're coming.
Thanks, Shirley. And Jeffrey put his hand up. Like Jeffrey might be looking for the mute button. Let's see.
Else, Alt-A will mute and unmute you in Zoom.
And,
okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
There you are.
Okay. With the COVID-19, we have had a daughter since birth with kidney problems, and she's had 2 kidney transplants, which means when the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, she couldn't leave the house. We had to wear masks thoroughly. I was ahead of the wave with wearing a mask at work to make sure that I didn't bring anything home. And what it did is it took all of the visits to the ICU in the hospital when she was getting operation after operation. But it was amazing how many things we didn't have to learn because we already knew the whole protocol, and just getting people to share with that type of insight could have kept them happy and not infected. And we're just mystified with people not taking the CDC seriously. And I just try to be an example. I always wore the mask, and after a while, I'm a construction inspector, highways, and to have people come up and say, "What's going on with your family because you're so diligent and regimented of what you're doing to keep yourself not infected. And it's amazing how people react to that. We had patrolmen that would come up, and when I arrived with the mask, they got a mask. When I talked to superintendents and foremen, and they realized how serious I was, they started doing everything they should do to not become an infected or another statistic.
That's a really good point, especially about change. I mean, all of us go through at least some stage of denial. And, so in this case, if you think about the need to wear a mask as being the change, some people were and are still in denial about that need, I guess. And that's a good point, Jeffrey. Thanks. Linda, you had your hand up. Did you decide against it? Or?
I didn't want to take up too much time. I just wanted to mention back to introverts and extroverts for just a second, that maybe we'll talk more about this in the next one about emotions, but excitement about something or fear about something looks very different for an extrovert than it does for an introvert.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think we will see that with folks as we start, moving forward with all of APOST.
Yes, and fear absolutely generates differently. It can be a negative emotion for some people, and some people fear makes them learn stuff and kind of break out of that box as well. Good point. Eric.
Hey, John. It's interesting because both my wife and I are actually introverts. Neither of us goes looking for change or anything, but we definitely respond to it differently. My wife hates it. I don't know. I guess I recognized early on that the best way to deal with change is to be a participant in it. So I tend to I found that if you just accept that everything changes, that's kind of what life is about. Things are always changing, and that if you just become a participant in it, then you have kind of like you said, John, you have a lot more say in how that goes. You can kind of make sure that things are in the best place for you. And I just kind of tend to accept change as what it is and then move forward with it.
Great points. And yeah, addressing it head on, I guess, to me is my preferred way as well. It may be a change that I'm looking forward to. It may be one that I'm not looking forward to, but I agree definitely that meeting it head on and is the best way to deal with it, because likely it's going to happen no matter what, right?
Absolutely.
Steven, you got something to add?
Oh, my camera's off.
I just saw you were unmuted, and yeah.
Oh no, it's just I used to not really do well with speaking in public and such, and I don't know. I think I'm on the cusp line of introvert, extrovert. If you were to put it into percentage, I might be close to 50-50 maybe. So on any day I can be very, very friendly, and other days I'll be in my introvert side. So, but yes, that change was tough to be able to speak in public more often. But I had an extrovert brother who used to force me into really embarrassing situations where I need to be extrovert when I wanted to be introvert. So got a good training. So it was a tough change, but it was a good change. Now I talk too much. So there goes the balance.
And that's a good point too. And speaking in public is definitely, to me, a life-altering change. If you can get there, it has been anyway for me. As an introvert, I was scared to death of speaking in public until I was forced into the situation. And where I went to college was a touristy place also. And we had like an award-winning orchid greenhouse on site, and an airport on the university. And it was a pretty diverse place, and tourists came. And I got put in the PR department to work, and part of my job was to take bus tours around campus. I mean, basically 70, 80 old people in a Greyhound around campus. And at first I was terrified, and the very first one, they passed the hat, and I ended up with like a $35 tip for an hour's work. And I was like, okay, give me another bus. that made me turn the corner there, and got kind of into public speaking. And so as a college age guy, I'd just start, I got to where I was flirting with the older ladies and give them an orchid out of the orchid greenhouse. And boy, I got a lot of tips. Anybody else want to share anything? All right, I'll switch to the next slide. So, and maybe hit the next one so we can have it all on here. So kind of along the lines of the way we've been talking here in our different discussions, it really is a change for the better or the worse, depending on how you view it. And like Eric said, if you're just willing to accept that change is going to happen, you can really kind of look hopefully for the better side and have a little bit more control over that change. I know, and I'm assuming there's a few people on here. I'm kind of a gadget nut. I will always like to have the latest and greatest electronic gadgets and those kinds of things. And that always involves a lot of change. But my wife will wait until, obviously if you're a gadget nut, you'll get some stuff that's kind of stupid. It's like it looked really cool, but it just didn't pan out kind of thing. And so my wife will kind of wait for me to weed out the stupid stuff, and then she'll kind of accept those newer things and utilize them. And but she sits and waits till she sees some value, where I'm out there trying to find the value. Looked like you could relate to that, Kenny. And I just recently moved, and going through and finding all these old electronics gadgets and things like that are outdated. But could I throw them away? No. I still had an old big size iPod that there was like, okay, oh, this has got full of songs, so I can't get rid of it, even though I haven't listened to it for 10 years. There is an adjustment period. And it really varies by the individual and by the change itself. So that's something that we often forget. I think of myself as kind of accepting of change and kind of often change seeking. But it really depends on what the change is. There's some changes that I don't like, and I'm going to be a little bit slower. So it really could. And it usually is uncomfortable at some point. And just because, like Sue mentioned, that really makes us feel out of control. We're not in control of our situation when we're addressing these change. And especially when they're coming from multiple directions, and sometimes conflicting, right? So we've got this, we're supposed to have, related to Beth, we're supposed to have this work-life balance with our children and family at home, but still be able to do quality work. And if you've got changes coming from multiple directions in both of those separate areas, it can be tough to juggle those, and kind of leads us to that issues that people have with work-life balance. And related again, because we do have change going that's hitting us from multiple areas. If we won't let go, a lot of times there's going to be this rippling effect where it gets worse and worse, because I haven't accepted this change over here, but this one's still coming at me over here. And so it has kind of this effect on you where it just keeps coming back and hitting you over and over, and probably making the stress higher than it needs to be. So why change? I mean, that's so much of questions that I see when I go around doing implementations in different agencies. This is the 26th agency that I've worked in my 21 years at Infotech. And a lot of that question is, our stuff works fine now. Why do we need to change? We're doing the job now, and your primary goal as an agency is to build roads and bridges, right? And get those things done and done safely. So then there's always that question is, I'm coming in here trying to get you to do things wildly differently. And so why do we need to make those changes? So there are lots of reasons. I'm going to click through. So we've got most of these in here. So really no change is without purpose, we hope. Most agencies don't spend a lot of money and personnel time and things like that if there isn't a purpose to that change. So it's not just because we want to do it or because Vanessa doesn't have enough to do or something like that. There's a reason behind that change. And a lot of that is these different kinds of things. So Sheridan talked about mergers and takeovers and things like that that are associated with those changes. And there are internal and external factors. So, we are affected as an agency, we're affected by politics, by the current economy. We're affected by technology and what's available. There's so many things that are affecting this. And so the reason for the change is usually, not one single thing, it's a multitude of things. One of the big things that I've seen in agencies that really affect people addressing and dealing with change is culture. So if the culture of the agency is more risk averse, if you make a mistake, you're going to be dogged for years over this because you made a mistake. That makes people less likely to accept and make change because they might get their hands slapped and have some issues, where other agencies are more accepting of change and as a culture, and that you can take a risk. You can try something stupid and it may or may not work, but you're not going to get in trouble for it. Just from Infotech standpoint, I always feel like I can really take a risk out there, and even if it fails, I'm not necessarily dinged for it, or even anybody saying that wasn't a good idea. Infotech is really accepting of that, and that's kind of what I'm seeing at ODOT is that we're really you seem to be really able to step out and not get in trouble for making a mistake when you're taking a risk. Donna, that looks like I'm seeing some body language there that you might not agree with that statement.
I don't agree with that statement at all, but
okay.
I find this extremely risk adverse to the point where we handicap ourselves.
And I agree with Donna. ODOT in general is extremely risk adverse because we've had to maintain a safe infrastructure for the general public. But there are people that are willing to make changes to help with dealing with risk and make things safer. And that's you can't make things safer unless you do change. So, and there are some people that understand that.
Good point.
Yes.
So that's interesting. My perception versus what you're feeling. Vanessa?
I agree. I think ODOT in general is risk averse, being a public agency. However, I think we've seen some really good change as far as people willing to take a risk and think outside of the box as far as processes. And John, maybe I'm wondering if that's what you're seeing as we're working on these modules, and that I've been so excited to see people think, okay, this is how we've always done it, seeing what AP is providing. I think we could do it this way. I think we can get there this way. So I think as far as people putting different ideas out there and not being afraid of being poo-pooed or anything too much, I do see that. I do see that happening in both, in all of our subcommittees. I do see that. I do agree, though, that overall ODOT and the, very high management is, it's very risk averse because there's so much, so many public eyes on us.
Yeah.
And public information with DMV, of course.
Yep, and it takes just one bad newspaper article, right, to really cause issues sometimes. Good points, and yeah, that it probably is my perception as I'm seeing, your subcommittees get in there and really dig in, and how can we make this work, kind of thing. And I guess that is what I'm seeing. Great conversation. So the next thing I've got is a little video you might remember from a few years ago. We there was this Who Moved My Cheese kind of a book, and this is a little video about that. I think it's about 4 minutes long, so I'll go ahead and start that, and you can watch that.
Who Moved My Cheese is about dealing with change in your work and in your life. Cheese being a metaphor for what you want in life. Everyone has their own idea what cheese means to them. And we go after it because it makes us happy. The maze in the story represents where you look for your cheese or happiness. Your cheese is always changing, and you should not get comfortable in relying on your cheese to always be how or where you left it. In doing so will help you deal with change and bring you greater success, no matter how you define success for yourself. The 4 characters in the story represent parts of us, and it's up to you to identify which parts you are now and which you would rather be from now on. There's 2 mice who don't overthink everything and just get on with life. Sniff constantly sniffs out the change and is ready for it. Scurry goes into action immediately without needing to know all the information. Then there's 2 little people, really smart people who've done well for themselves so far. Hem, he likes to stay in a safe, familiar territory, and Haw, who's slow to adapt to change but is open-minded. Sniff and Scurry go out and seek new cheese every day. Hem and Haw comfortably rely on their past knowledge and experience and assure themselves the cheese will be right where they left it. Hem and Haw even moved their house closer to their cheese and built a social life around it. They became so comfortable they didn't even notice what was happening. Sniff and Scurry noticed the cheese was diminishing and that one day it wasn't there. But they were not surprised. They were prepared and knew what to do. The situation had changed, so they decided to change. They sniffed and scurried in search of new cheese. Hem and Haw had not been paying attention to the changes. They took it for granted and were unprepared. How could this have happened, they thought? Nobody warned them. They wanted to believe somebody moved their cheese and didn't want to believe that they had failed to notice it getting smaller and smaller every day. Hem's complicated brain and deep belief system demanded to know why this had been done to him. While Hem and Haw were busy worrying about what happened to them, Sniff and Scurry were already out finding new cheese in uncharted territory, and it didn't take long before they found new cheese and started enjoying life again. Hem and Haw remained bitter and angry about not having their old cheese, complaining how life was unfair to them. They got used to being comfortable and were now afraid to go find new cheese. They got stuck in a habit of doing the same things over and over again and wondering why things didn't get better. Eventually, Haw realized the cheese was never coming back and may have to face his fears and go find new cheese. He finally stopped blaming others and took responsibility for himself. After all, it is safer to search in the maze than remain in a cheeseless situation. As Haw enjoyed his newfound cheese, he reflected on past mistakes and realized nothing got better until he changed. He didn't like it at the time, but the change was a blessing in disguise. Hem was too stubborn. or proud, or just simply unwilling to change. Nobody knows what became of him. Move with the cheese.
Okay. So, lots of themes in there that we've already talked about, kind of addressing those changes head on, like Eric mentioned, rather than even if you're not comfortable with the change or think you're going to dislike it, dealing with it head on really puts you ahead of the game, right? You've started through that process by doing that. And then also, the fact that change happens regularly. The guy, him, that just never kind of got there and says nobody knew what happened to him. When I used to work for Missouri DOT before I came to Infotech, and Missouri DOT back in the 90s was really into change and transition, and is actually where I got started in working in this. And we did lots of work, and there were many people there who had been there since the beginning of the interstate system. So they had been there 35, 40 years because the interstate system started in Missouri. In just outside of St. Louis was the very first interstate highway. It's called Eisenhower Highway now. And so there was lots of people that had been around for lots of years and had this incredible institutional knowledge, had seen it and done it all. And however, like many people in the 90s, even though they had been using and been adding new tools to their repertoire for years, for some reason, people said with computers, no, not going to do it. Not going to learn how to do it. I'm just not. And the state construction engineer, to his credit, was very tough. He was close to retirement himself and not a computer user. But when we got the software up and running, it was called Site Manager at the time. He actually stood up in front of the entire construction at an engineers conference, the entire construction unit, and said, basically, you all, I really recognize your experience and it's amazing, but if you can't use the new tools, you can't do the job. And he indicated, that he was in there using the software. And he said, I stumble around every day, but, and frankly, I had to go in and help him sign a change order every time he needed to do that. But he did it. And it was interesting because there were quite a few people, even though it was a loss of great experience, there were quite a few people that chose to retire because they did not want to use a computer. And I always thought that was interesting that they would go that far to not use a computer. Any other comments about that?
I have a comment about that. It's
Go
taken
for it.
50 minutes. So we were talking about this in a subcommittee yesterday, and someone brought up a really valid point about most of us hear every single day, oh, I've just got to get through the next 13 months, or I just got to get through the next 3 years, from all the people that are retiring. Number one, when it's your turn, don't be that person that does that to everybody and says, oh, I've just got to get through the next 3 years. Because what you're actually saying is I don't want to change, and I'm not going to change, and I'm going to hold everybody back. The comment that the person made was, yeah, but they're not gone yet, ... And that right there is the most important thing, is that attitude is, they're not gone yet. It's still present in our daily life, and it's holding us back, and it's draining, and it sucks the life out of your enthusiasm when you have to deal with those people.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't know. It was 2 years ago, I think. I don't know who did the report, but a report came out that something like 30 to 40% of ODOT will be eligible to retire in the next 5 years. And I feel like 2 years later, or however, it's probably been longer than that, but now I feel like we're in that window where it's happening. And to Donna's point, I feel like I don't go to a meeting or have a conversation where there's not somebody in the room who is either doing the notorious ODOT 1,000 hours or is retiring in the next 6 months, year.
Yeah, that's another thing. The 1,000-hour people that don't want change, that keep hanging on.
And no offense to anybody who's in their 1,000 hours. You know, you earned it to get to this point, but some of us got 30 years left and gonna have to change with this with this and other things that are coming.
Good point. Beth, you had your hand up. Did you decide against it?
I was clapping for Donna.
Oh, okay.
I was applauding.
Shirley.
And obviously I'm not on the Oregon payroll, but I did want to kind of second what John had said. I came from Nebraska, and so I have been where all of you are today. And actually, I've been around so many years that I go back to that when we first brought in what is now called pre-construction, we went from paper and pencil, literally, to having to start using the computer. And there were a lot of people who had the attitudes of like, no, just leave me alone. I'm going to be out of here in a year or 2 or 3. And so it was challenging at times, but if the decision, you know, your agency wants to move forward and adopt new tools, then yeah, we all have to work together to get past that. But I also well, that's actually how I met John when he was at Missouri and I was at Nebraska, because we were both working on implementing a site manager in our states. And so I guess I'm just saying that John and I have been on the same side of the issue that you all are now. And so we do understand and we do feel what you're having to deal with as everybody moves forward. So that's it.
Good point. And yeah, and Shirley and I have probably known each other for 25 years. So that's through both our agencies and Infotech. Anybody else? Okay. So the next slide here is about the change curve and kind of the support stages. So the communications, the training support and communications team, which Sue Herring is leading, and Barbara Morris is the Infotech liaison. And there are quite a few other folks on here that are on that team, are really working to give people information and communication at the appropriate times. And so that's part of what the stakeholder analysis is going to provide, and why we asked you to please spend some time filling that out, so that they can get the information and communication to people appropriately. If you remember the cheesy video that we watched the other day, there was a lot of focus on that, about giving information to people at the appropriate time and let them work through it. And then we've got the emotional support that's associated with that. And, you know, the emotional support doesn't have to be anything touchy-feely or anything like that. It could be just listening to somebody rant for a little while, and let them get it out of their system. A lot of times that's enough support to just for you to sit there and nod your head and say, yep, I understand how you feel and sorry you feel that way, but let's get this done, kind of thing. So that emotional support there, and then guidance and directions. So be prepared to, if you're helping somebody through change, be prepared to, when they're ready, offer them some guidance and directions, even if it's just, this is how I deal with it, this is what I do kind of things. So, there is some, a lot of people have shock. A lot of people that I find in agencies have denial over it. So you may have had multiple things, especially implementations, start up and maybe failed and stopped at some point or just disappeared. And a lot of people that I find in agencies have kind of that denial phase is extended a lot of times, because you might have seen, especially if you've been around for a while, 2 or 3 or 4 tries at trying to do some kind of a system-wide change, and it failed. So see that a lot. The depression, anger, they don't care what I'm doing, and I don't get paid for what I'm doing, and that kind of thing. Why should I care about it? And it's kind of interesting, because what I find with DOTs kind of universally is that people really do care what they're doing. You want to do a good job. You're responsible for the safety of a lot of people, the traveling public, and doing it wrong can be catastrophic. So I find over and over that people do care about what they're doing and want to do a good job. And hopefully our software leads us into doing that good job, and helping and not doing any hindering. And then the resignation, there's nothing that I can do about it. And that goes back to Eric's point earlier is, you may not be able to stop the change, but you could certainly have some influence over it, especially by virtue of being on this team. Then that kind of leads you into that acceptance and letting go. If this is how it's going to be, how can I figure out my way forward the best way? Then we finally get to that looking forward. Okay, we've got it figured out. Throw that next change at me, right? Or yeah, I'm going to go in my hole and see if I can avoid a change or two, depending on how you look at it. Anybody got any thoughts? Anybody want to mention anything on that? Okay. So some of the things you can ask yourself, where am I now? And my daughter always used to say, how does that make you feel? And kind of think about, not only where you are, but how you feel about where you are. You can think about the short term, how am I going to address this change in the next 7 days? Maybe it's taking a walk in the woods or something like that makes you feel better about the change. Whatever works. How am I committed to taking this step? Or how committed am I to taking this step? So, if it's just something that you're not really committed to, like working out, so many people want to work out and start a workout program. And it really boils down to how committed you are to that workout program, whether or not you continue, which obviously a workout program leads to positive change if you can keep that up. And then, you can do a 1 to 10 kind of scale or those kinds of things. I know some people like to journal and write it down. Some people like to talk to their significant others about it. There are lots of options to kind of work through this yourself. The key reasons you're here, you're there. So, like we've said, you've got some control over the change now. Christy says, how can I do my best? And so that's one of the things that you can ask yourself. And that's a great one to add to that, Christy. How can I do my best at this? And kind of, again, by being on this team, you've got some control and some ability to add to that rather than being dragged along and kind of being a negative part of it. Realizing that everybody has to go through that curve, you can kind of start thinking about and planning, how can I get myself through this difficult curve? and get back to something that I'm comfortable with and have some comfort in. And related to the risk, if I wasn't worried about the consequences, what would I do if I didn't have to worry about the risk that ODOT has? And you can think about small steps to take. And also, one of the big things that I really like and utilize a lot is mentorship. I think mentorship is really important. I know Shirley and I have used each other for mentors several times over the years. And I think that mentorship can really be beneficial in helping people over a curve, especially if the other person's already been there. Anybody want to add to that? Linda, for some reason you moved to the front of my queue. Did you have something to add?
Nope, nothing to add.
Okay, I don't know why you jumped over there, but
Thanks for checking.
This is Darcy, and I think communication is really big when you have all this change. Like this AASHTOWare is definitely going to be a big change. And for me, I felt the best way for me to change with what was coming was to get involved. So that's why I'm on a couple of different committees. It's actually for me as much as it is for my position and my crew, and to also kind of help them along too when this comes down the pike. Just to try and have as much information as I can. For me personally, that helps me, but then I'm also in a position at work that I will be helping others as well. So I don't know, I think communication is really big, definitely with all this change, and giving people the time. If you communicate it, they're gonna need some time to definitely, sorry about that. Oh. I'm so sorry. I have to take this, but I'll get back to you.
Okay, thanks, Darcy. That was like having a, yeah, you're done talking. Yeah. Barbara Harriman.
Yeah, one thing, that's what I was going to talk about, time, and it's important for myself and also to help others understand there's going to be a transition period, to any change. So we have to be patient with ourselves and with others as we're moving through this change. So, if we can understand that, that will help us get through it easier too.
Good point, Barbara. Donna.
I think it's also important to remember, being the technical oriented agency that we are, we tend to not like to deal with feelings or even acknowledge that we have feelings, and feelings are a bad thing. Before people start beating themselves up, and I'm kind of like calling my own kettle black here, before we start beating each other up or ourselves up about how that, maybe we had a bad day, we're on change overload, or I'm feeling this or I'm feeling that. It's not the feelings that are bad, it's how you choose to respond according to those feelings that's going to have an impact, and that impact can either be negative or positive. So it's not the feeling itself that is bad, it's what do you choose to do with it? Do you choose to have a positive impact? Maybe you take a couple minutes, you recognize, I'm not my best self today, please don't schedule a meeting with me. Because I won't give you my best, contribution today. Or do you just barrel through creating chaos and leaving bodies in your wake because of your feelings?
Good point. And yeah, to kind of I guess mute yourself a little bit when you realize you're having a rough day. And when we started, somebody told Jill that they were kind of made their day to see her on here, and that's such an easy little thing to say, and she said it made her day, and it's so much easier to make somebody's day, isn't it, than to be I guess, mean and nasty. Jeffrey.
I'm on a subcommittee for the daily progress report, and I'm trying to talk to the rest of our crew that's going to have to face this in 2 or 3 years, that it is a piece of software, but it works completely differently, and hopefully it's as intuitive as other AASHTO programs that I've dealt with, because I got really excited when I got invited to the subcommittee, because I found out I was only one of 2 inspectors that were invited to actually say, this is what we do every day, and this is what you can do to the program to make it easier. And on our weekly progress, our weekly crew meetings, I've had to restate that this is not a bad thing. We're trying to make it easier and faster. And everybody, for as long as I've been with ODOT and OBDP, have always complained that how come a daily report takes so long to write? And it's because we have to write a new report every day. We can't just use standard phrases and then just edit to make it have a good continuity. And this is a fabulous opportunity. I mean, I am really excited and on as many committees as possible. I can give them it's going to work, and it'll work well, and it'll save you time. All you have to do is make the learning curve short and sweet.
Agreed, and lots of support, I guess, from the agency too. So if you do have issues, you've got somebody to call, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want the people that are going to retire, which I know they are, quitting just because it's another software. I can't understand that, but I'll work on it.
Yep. Good point. Linda.
So when we do our weekly career check-in, we all hop on a Teams meeting, and everybody gets a chance to just talk about what they're doing, and especially if it affects anybody else's projects or workflows. And one of our team members regularly uses the phrase, I have nothing for the good of the order, is what he'll say. And I think asking yourself if what you want to contribute to a discussion, especially around change, does it contribute to the good of the order, can be a good question to ask yourself.
That's a great point, and kind of an odd phrasing, but yeah, it kind of makes sense.
It is odd, but that's what makes it fun, and it fits his personality. So it makes us all chuckle.
Yeah, we've got there's somebody on one of our support groups that once everybody went to a virtual environment and was working from home, he joins every meeting every day with a different background behind him, and appropriate costume associated with it. And you know, it was kind of, that was the way he addressed change, and it became, you know, this huge, people that had nothing to do with that group were joining the meetings just so they could see what costume the guy was wearing today. And you know, what an awesome way to address change and deal with that. And he was one of those extroverts, and that's how he addressed it. Was I don't know if he still does those costume things, if any infotech people know, but it was a regular thing. Okay, I'm gonna move on here a little bit. So kind of thinking about dealing with your own reactions. First of all, you should, oh, I didn't know that. So Sue in chat says for the good of the order is from Robert's Rules of Order. And so that's interesting to know. So dealing with your own reactions, for the first thing, you know, expect a reaction. You're gonna have, you know, some kind of a reaction, right, to a big change. And accept that your feelings are the natural result of being in an uncomfortable situation. Donna kind of talked about us ignoring feelings, but you know, I guess I find that it's sometimes really difficult to detach emotions from especially work that I care about. There's some emotion that goes along with doing something that you care about doing and doing right. Tell yourself the truth. You know, if you're really worried, you know, that this is not going to work, that you've got some kind of an issue, it's okay to tell yourself the truth about that and allow yourself kind of those emotions that are associated with it. Get as much information as you can. You know, there are multiple ways that the communications team is communicating. And, you know, some people like to read stuff like in the newsletter that recently came out. They like to maybe just ping somebody and ask questions. You may like to just dig around in Doc Express and where all the contract information is and just read about it at your leisure. There are lots and lots of ways to get information. I encourage you to go find what you need and kind of get it. Don't depend on it falling in your lap. And again, reach out to others. All of the Infotech staff are here to help you all and get this to be a successful implementation with the best results for everybody. We're not here to add work to people, to intentionally complicate things. Our main job is to get in here and get the most efficient, consistent software implementation we can. And then talking with people, I already mentioned about mentors. If you've got a mentor or anything, that is awesome. And depending on your career path, a lot of professional organizations offer kind of mentorship programs. Excuse me. And there's also often some employee assistance programs where you can access as well. And then give yourself time. Everybody needs some time to deal with it. Some people need a different amount of time to deal with it. And then sometimes you're gonna, you may lose some stuff that you really loved. One of the things that I was just mentioning yesterday, we were in an internal project managers meeting, and our director asked us who's ready to travel or who's still missing travel after a year of not. And that's one of my losses. My favorite thing is being on site with my clients and that interaction together and the work that we get done, even though travel is difficult. And that's something that I've really felt a loss for this last year, is not being able to travel and not being able to spend that time on site with my clients. So some questions to you. So, what do you think about the change? How do you feel about it? Why do you think the change is needed? Or if you think it's not needed, why? What are your ideas about the change? Have you thought about and how you'll be impacted by the change? So this one right here, the how you'll be impacted, is one of the things that most people go to immediately. What's in it for me is kind of the phrase that I always think of, and that a lot of people think is what's in it for me? How has this impacted me? How can it be better? How can it be worse? Those kinds of things. What do you see your role? So obviously all the people on this call have some kind of a role in this change. And so what do you see your role related to that? And your personal opinion about that. And then if you've had some experience with this type of change, so some of you may have implemented a big chunk of software before, like Doc Express or something like that. And so, what is your experience related to that? And would you change anything about the change? So, we've got a fairly long-term project, and we're doing it a certain method with these subcommittees and things like that. And so you could think about what you might change about the change itself. So a few quotes related to change. So if you read the newsletter, you might remember the article about the marbled Merlot and the coyote, and how the marbled Merlot is kind of has a distinct. Am I saying that right, Donna? It has a distinct
Marbled Merlot.
Marbled Merlot. Not okay. I was thinking of wine. Okay.
A Merlot is a type of auk, A-U-K, which is kind of like in the penguin family.
Yeah, so you can tell the story better than me. You want to tell it?
That was just a Freudian slip there, John.
Yeah.
You sure?
We
Yeah,
call
go for
those Floridian slips here.
I call it something else, Scott. We'll do that offline. So the marbled Merlot, and when I'm facilitating a workshop that this comes up in, I often slip and say Marlboro Merlot because I get all tongue-tied. Anyway, it lays one egg a year. It has a very rigid nesting pattern, and it nests in old growth forests along the Pacific Northwest. As the coastline has been changing because of humans, we're clearing and building and stuff like that. And then also because of natural and environmental issues, what the auk does, the marbled Merlot lays an egg, and then it runs back and forth from the nest to the coast to get food and to get water. That the nest is getting further and further away from the coastline, and that's the problem because of environmental changes and human changes. So the nest is being exposed for a longer period of time, leaving the egg vulnerable to predators. Crows and other critters are stealing the eggs. So what's happening is the marbled Merlot is not endangered yet, but it's heading into the scary place where there's not going to be any more of them. I think a lot of ODOT projects and people that have worked in the geo-environmental section are pretty aware. We've seen news articles about the marbled Merlot. Consequently, like I said, they lay one egg a year. They're very rigid in their nesting patterns. They're not changing and adapting to their environment. So they're being severely reduced in numbers. The coyote is the most adaptable animal in North America. It adapts not only its breeding, but its eating, socialization, hunting, pretty much everything that it does, it can adapt according to whatever environment it's in, whether that's out in the wild or whether that's in a neighborhood or a city. It can not only survive, but more importantly, I think the key word is that the coyote thrives. It doesn't just survive chugging along, it actually thrives. And the story behind our little coyote that you see in our emails a lot is, which one do you want to be? Do you want to be the coyote or do you want to be the marbled Merlot?
Thanks, Donna. Yeah, you definitely tell that better than me. So then the last thing that I wanted to point out here on this slide is that we all recognize that we are going to have change happen to us. That's just what happens in life. So really our only security, the only thing that we can expect to happen, and that security that's behind it, is improving our ability to make changes, right? So, if we're focused on resisting change, there's no security in that because it's going to happen whether you like it or not. So that's really our only security, is our ability to adapt to change, kind of like the coyote. When I lived in Portland, I was on the edge of Forest Park, and we had a coyote that occasionally came and just kind of laid in our backyard. And he was the healthiest looking coyote I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he was fat and happy, and he'd come sit in our backyard in the sunshine and hang out for a little while and then leave. So just kind of, to me, seeking out change kind of helps me deal with that security related to that. So we've got a worksheet that I believe you were provided after you signed up for this, and I'll share it here. So hopefully everybody can see that. So we have a couple of questions here. And also I wanted to mention that Sue posted in the chat a link to the newsletter that I mentioned a minute ago that recently went out. And so if you want to use that link, you can to kind of update yourself if you missed it. So we do have a couple of questions that we'd really like you to think about. And the first one is just, it's really thinking about your personal experience with change. I'm not going to call anybody out, but if you have answered these questions already, and you would like to share, feel free, either number one or number two. So anyway, kind of think about, I define change in relation to work as, so how do you define change? Is the change, do you define change as anything I'm doing business process wise? Do you define change as, I need to do, somebody asked me for this new report, so I need to make a change to do that? How do you define change in relation to work yourself? Anybody?
I'll go. So I guess for me, change as it pertains to work versus life, like personal life. For me, change as it pertains to work is an opportunity for progress, especially I feel like in the work we do. So I guess at least personally, I don't view change as negative when it comes to work. Generally, I think when change comes along, it means an opportunity for increased efficiencies, increased accuracies, better communications. Every change I've gone through in work is aimed at improving things. So for me, change means progress.
And yeah, and good point. And in your area in civil rights, of course, that's currently a really dynamic area, which is itself changing a lot and adjusting as it goes along. So yeah, having a good attitude towards change, especially in civil rights, would be really, really important, I would think. Rex, would you like to add?
Yeah, just kind of to piggyback what Kenny said, I think change is usually a good thing. And kind of related to work, anytime your steps, your processes, the reporting, just kind of your day-to-day stuff changes. Obviously, people handle that differently, but I mean, those changes could be major, they could be minor, but usually you're headed in the right direction if you're changing, you're evolving, you're trying to be at the forefront of everything and a little proactive as opposed to reactive and trying to play catch up. I think change plays a huge factor in that you want to get better and be the best that you can be.
Great points. And one of the things about this software is the early adopters, the people that are accepting this change right off the bat, are going to end up being the experts, right? And which to me makes you more valuable to the agency as a whole. When you become that expert in the software and the business processes that are being used right now, you're providing more value to the agency and then I guess to the public. Vanessa. Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry, I had to struggle with the mute button for a second there. Just real quick, for me, change, I am excited because it usually means I have a new project that's initiating, and that's exciting. That's a new change. But it's also, I can't lie that there's a little bit of the fear factor in there too, because I realize that when we're making these changes, it impacts so many people, and how those impacts happen. trying to make sure that we don't miss anything. And I like to make sure everybody's happy. So change is exciting yet fearful, I think, for me as well. But you know, I like it. I like to. This is work related, of course. I like the change to happen and be in it also, rather than just wait for it to happen to me.
Great point. Annie, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yes, I kind of second Vanessa. For me, the change is a good things. Not all the changes are good, but especially the last 2 years, all of the changes, not only in our work, but on a daily basis in family relations, was very impact our lives. And I think that I learned a lot. And we actually, as a department in our work related, we learn how to communicate better with each other, how to do meetings better, how to be aware of what's going on around us and around our families and how people feeling, more basically better communication for sure. So for me, those changes that has happened recently in my work life or in my personal life, I actually like it a lot.
Great point. Sue.
I look at change in the workplace more like I want to be at the ground level so that I understand what's going on and what's happening, and like has already been said, helping to make decisions. But the decision making part is less important to me than feeling I know what's happening and I can explain it to others, than being blindsided by it later, not having any clue of what was going on.
Yeah, kind of putting your head in the sand and hoping it goes away, and then it doesn't, and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Yep, good point. Beth.
I started listing off how I define change, and a lot of the things have already been talked about, like new technology, new processes, that sort of thing. But the very first thing that I listed was new people to interact with. And that's something that I like. I like people. I like having good relationships with them. And I think that anytime you have change, it gives you the opportunity to form new relationships and in a work environment, hopefully interact and do business with people that you weren't previously. So that's something that I look forward to.
That's interesting. I'd never really thought about that aspect of it as yeah, making those new relationships and things like that. And you know, I know from my experience over the years at Infotech, some of my clients have become really good friends, and I hadn't really thought about that aspect of how that's changed me and hopefully them in a good way. Anybody else? So the second question here basically has 16 different things that are associated with change, and just wondering about you know, is there anybody on here that can kind of maybe check all of these boxes, because there are a lot of changes going on. And okay, so Sue's saying that she had 11 of these that she was able to check. So there are a lot of changes here: reorganizations, new reporting structures. Obviously, we're in the middle of modifications in business processes and new technology. Most agencies are having a reduction of resources as people are retiring. A lot of times it's by attrition. And Beth is saying she has 11 also. And related to I and J, centralization and decentralization, and over my years of going to different agencies, I always think of it as almost cyclical kind of that happens over over time, as most agencies will decentralize and give all kinds of authority to the regions and districts, and then they'll go the other direction. At some point, they'll get a different kind of leader and they'll re-centralize stuff, and we're going to make all the decisions in the main office. And it almost makes me think of a long, like a giant DOT monster that's taking a big breath and pulling everything in to be centralized, and then letting out that breath and sending it all out to spewing out all those things out to the regions or districts. New work standards. So work standards change, transfer to a new work group. So, I know that several people today have talked about being in different areas and kind of changing their work groups. Changes in the hours of work. So that's one thing that probably most of the infotech people on here can relate to, because they are 3 hours later than us. And they've had to, in a lot of cases, to work on this project, rethink their hours of work and certainly spend some what used to be their evening off time working with you all. Oh, Kenny had 14, and including, yeah. So yeah, I suspected that most of you would be able to kind of add to those. Anybody got any thoughts about how all of those things affect you or the agency?
I think that the more boxes that are checked make you a more well-rounded member of any future team. That you're better adaptable for anything that comes your way in your current position or in any other position you may be within the organization. But I just think it makes you adaptable, and that is a true asset, I think, for any team.
That's a really good point, Sheridan, and especially related to your past experience before you got here. Yeah, that ability to adapt now is kind of ingrained, and hopefully the agency won't have a takeover or anything like that. But
I just don't want any more explosions.
Yeah, or explosions. Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
I think Christy had her hand up at some point.
That was an accident. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. And I think Darcy was just a thumbs up, but related to Sheridan's comment. Shirley, did you have something?
I was just going to go with Sheridan. I don't want any explosions either. And, some of the turmoil that she has mentioned when she talked earlier about going through, and she's here today participating and ready for more changes. I personally find that very remarkable, Sheridan. Just hang in there.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I don't know about that, but I truly appreciate that, Shirley. Thank you.
That's a good point. I mean, yeah, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? Anybody else? Any other discussion about kind of what we've covered today you'd like to talk about? Well, we're kind of waiting for y'all to think about that. We would like you to fill out that form, if you would, and if you're comfortable with it, please send it to the email address. Let's see, I'll get it and post it in here again, just so we've got it. So that's ODOT eConstruction.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm posting it in chat again, just so everybody has it. So really encourage you to sometimes just thinking through that and filling out that little worksheet is really helpful, and some things may dawn on you as you kind of think about that as well. Oh, Tony's got a bunch too, 14 plus. So, it just really shows that how much change is coming at you. And when we think about it, how many different ways it's coming at you as well. So yes, if you would, if you're comfortable with sharing kind of your thoughts, that would be great. That helps the communication team know what everybody needs communication wise and support wise and that kind of thing. But obviously some people might have some deep thoughts that they want to keep to themselves, which is fine as well. Anything from anybody else? It's time for that uncomfortable silence.
No, I think this is just a good place to talk about, those feelings of, maybe, I'm worried, or this change is seeming too much too fast. How are we going to handle this? I felt this has been really good this morning. Just, you feel the anxiety kind of go whoosh as you just start expressing, changes, how change impacts you and how it feels. It's almost like you recognize it by saying it out loud. You kind of recognize it and how it impacts yourself, and what, you can start going, okay, well, I feel that way. How can I help myself, or how can I help somebody else make that change?
Good points. And yeah, and talking about it in a group like this, I think we all realize that we are all going through the same thing. And, so many times we think of, I'm going through this alone kind of thing. And it's not that at all. And this team has got a lot of support, both at the management level and all the way through middle management. And so there is a lot of support here, and we have a lot of infotech people that are here to support as well. And realize too that all of the infotech people that this is a constant change for them too. So they adapt and adjust to things that you need and that kind of thing. And so this is a constant change for them as well. Anybody else? Okay, well, thanks for joining us kind of on this beautiful Friday. I know it's sunny here where I am on the Oregon coast, and I hope it's a good weekend for everybody, and would really encourage you to join us next week. So same bat time, same bat channel.
Wait a minute, John, you didn't, you usually say.
Do what?
I say out here where I am on the best coast.
Oh,
yeah.
We almost got away without hearing that, Vanessa. We were inches from a clean getaway.
So,
sorry.
Before we go, I have one more thing on this, the date and time on that for workshop 2 on that last slide, John.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this was wrong, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And it is really next Friday.
Yes. And from 8:30 to 10:30.
Yeah. Same bat time, same bat channel next Friday. So ignore this at the bottom.
I just want to thank everybody for taking the time, both ODOT staff and Infotech staff. Thank you so much for the generosity of your time to attend this. We all know that time is the most precious commodity right now. So thank you for being so generous in attending this.
Yeah.
Well said.
Agreed. And also, if you thought there was some value in this, really please encourage your coworkers to join us. Hopefully it was not too painful if you usually take off Fridays and you happen to join us. Hey, we've got the right date on this slide. So yeah.
I think that's East Coast time on there.
Is it? Oh, it is.
That's because it's the most important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're in Nebraska, it's 10:30 to 12:30.
That's right. That's right.
Sometimes for us, like for myself, when I'm working with states that are on the west coast, or however you say that, or on the east best coast. So I don't want to offend anyone here.
We're the Beast Coast now. I just decided.
Or yeah, you're always juggling these times to keep up. So
I second that, Jason.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the changes that I've had troubles with for 21 years now, is I always struggle with the time zone changes and calculating in my head what time it is with most of my coworkers, and versus the best coast, Scotty.
Yeah, and I guess that's something else. I know, John, you talked about Infotech folks flexing their time, and they're working in the evenings. I mean, sometimes I look up and it's like 4 o'clock and I'm on a meeting with Michael, or I'm like, oh my gosh, Michael, it's 7 o'clock. That's crazy. But I also want to say to the ODOT folks, you know, I appreciate you flexing your time and working through what is normally, you know, well, for 8 to 5ers, the noon to 1 lunch period, or if you're a 7 a.m. person, you know, the 11 o'clock lunchtime. No, I'm really, thank you for using your time in a meeting and then being able to be flexible. That's a big change. That's a change. So thank you.
So Barbara's just wanting to make sure, Barbara Harriman is just wanting to make sure that she has the right people documented for the for attendance. And so she's asking who 541-419-4101 is, and the other phone number that's listed here, 4556. So if you could let Barbara know who you were, so she can jot down that you were, who was attending. Any other comments anybody has before we adjourn?
Thank you, John. This was great.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks everybody,
fun.
and we'll see you next Friday.